Good morning, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I am so jazzed and excited for this topic, and I promise it's not because this is my third coffee of the day. That's got nothing to do with it. That's hot. Ooh. So today we're going to be talking about a really effective tip. It's also delightfully simple, which is my favorite kind of tip, for learning grammar. And it's especially relevant when learning more and more advanced grammar. So lots to talk about in a very short time, and this video is sponsored by Skillshare, which I'm super excited about, but I'll tell you more about that later in the video. For now, let's take one more cautious sip of this very hot coffee and jump in. Still hot, yep. Okay, so let me just sort of describe the scenario that I see almost all the time. And I've seen this millions of times, it feels like, over the 10 or 15 years I've been learning languages, teaching languages. It's that almost universally, people seem to combine the activities of learning new vocabulary and learning new grammar. They do them both at the same time, right? And so this is especially prevalent with language learning apps or textbooks or classes, right? Which, let's face it, that covers a large percentage of how people learn languages these days. What happens is they'll introduce, let's say, a new verb tense, a new conjugation, and what they'll do is, through the example sentences they're gonna give you, they'll basically introduce 10 or 20 new words as well. Now they'll teach you the past tense, but in doing that, they'll teach you the past tense of 10 new verbs. And to me, this is deeply problematic at basically all levels of learning. Because when you first start learning a language, everything is foreign, right? And so nothing is more just mind-bogglingly difficult, and it's so cognitively effortful to just simply try to wrap your head around this new syntax, right? Even if the syntax is fairly close to your native language, when we first start things, especially if it's your first time learning a foreign language, that basic task of just constructing simple sentences, it can be very challenging. Now, especially if you're learning a language, like let's say you're an English native speaker learning Japanese, where the syntax is just completely different, then that task of learning the most basic grammar, it's really, really difficult. And the same thing is true of vocabulary, right? So when we first start learning a language, it's kind of amazing how long it takes sometimes to just learn new words. And I think anyone who has started learning a language knows that feeling where you have to sometimes see the same word just over and over. You flashcard it, you see it in context, you see example sentences. It just takes a while for words to stick. And to me, this is one of those sort of hallmark experiences and moments when we start to become kind of a really solid mid-intermediate learner, is that it just gets a lot easier, right? Like we find that most of the new words we learn, they're either related or similar to other words that we know. We just have a deeper level of comfort. Everything feels a bit easier. But in the beginning, it's really complex to do both of these things. So the idea of, cool, let's learn basic grammar, and every step of the way, let's introduce 10 new words. Let's just make sure that at no moment are you comfortable with any of the words in any of these example sentences. It's really, really difficult. And so for me, a leading principle that I have when I'm learning a new language, and especially when teaching new languages to others, when I used to do that full time, is I always try to isolate the activity and the goal that we have in that moment, right? So if my goal right now is I'm trying to learn, let's say the, passé composé in French, right? It's one of the past tenses, just to say it simply. Well, I want to really isolate that particular thing. And so I'm going to, for example, create lots of example sentences, but I'm going to do so with words that I'm really, really comfortable with. Because that way, I'm specifically focusing on learning this new piece of grammar. Now, this is even more true when we're not just talking about a conjugation or something, but we're talking about, getting used to more complex sentences, more complex grammatical patterns and structures. Well, if my goal is to get comfortable expressing myself, let's say with relative clauses, where I'm going to say, the man who bought the book today has gone home, whatever, well, then I want to make sure that in that moment when my primary goal is becoming comfortable and confident using those more complex types of sentences and constructions, I want to be using words that I'm really comfortable with. But what tends to happen in language apps, courses, and I think just a natural thing we do is we introduce more and more complex grammar simultaneously as we are adding new vocabulary. And at the advanced levels, this is especially problematic because what tends to happen is, let's say that you're now learning the passive voice, right? Well, this tends to come a lot later on, right? So if you're studying a textbook or a language learning app, a lot of them don't even teach passive voice. If they do, it tends to be one of their, more advanced courses. And so that's usually the moment where they're also introducing tons and tons of more difficult words, specialized words, things that aren't necessarily so easy for you to learn. And again, you get this sort of combination of really challenging cognitive tasks. And I just think that this is one of the reasons why people really struggle to learn grammar at every step of the way. And I think that because grammar has this sort of stigma, of being this bad, evil thing, and there's certainly a lot of people in the online learning community that have some level of disdain for grammar, I think, or certainly discourage it, whatever. I think this is part of it. It's that when we have this terrible experience learning grammar, that's the easy thing to point to, right? Because everyone knows we need to learn vocabulary, we need to learn new words, we like learning new words, so let's just point to the grammar. I'm not saying grammar is perfect, everybody's a little bit different, but I do think that this is one of the big reasons why people struggle, and I just love this tip. It's so delightfully simple. It's just, when you're learning new grammar, and most of all when you're practicing new grammar and you're trying to get comfortable making more complex sentences and also digesting more complex sentences, use either the most simple words that you can, or at least use words that you are very, very comfortable with and you've already internalized. And just isolate that activity in a given moment. And please know, as you get more advanced, there's going to be so much opportunity to do these things in a more combined way, right? So if you're watching a new television series and you've got the subtitles in your target language, you've got your notebook out, whatever, or you're listening to a podcast, maybe passively or actively, you're reading a novel or a short story, those are going to be moments where you get the chance to really practice all these constructions and, grammatical patterns while also, exploring new vocabulary, new words. And those are these wonderfully just effective and immersive combined experiences that you can have. So, don't worry, there's still plenty of opportunity to explore these things, but I just think that when you're specifically focused on learning grammar, make sure that you're actually focused on the grammar. This video is sponsored by the kind folks over at Skillshare. Now, Skillshare is a platform where you can take classes on anything from art and design to productivity, business, creative writing, and so much more. Now, one of the reasons why I love having Skillshare as a sponsor is that the community and range of classes is just so vast. Skillshare is actually where I took some of my very first UX and UI design classes several years ago, and I recently took a class called Simple Productivity: How to Accomplish More with Less by Greg McKeown. Now, some of you may remember that Greg is actually the author of the book Essentialism, which I reviewed for language learners on this channel. McKeown's Skillshare class is based on that book, and it covers simple but powerful ideas of how you can be making your best contribution to whatever you're doing at a given time. And for me, one of the biggest language learning takeaways was just asking myself this constant but simple question: are the activities I'm engaging in right now the most impactful for helping me reach my current goals? And I think that this essentialist approach to learning languages
is really simple and effective. Now, Skillshare has kindly offered a free trial of premium membership to the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description so that you can explore your creativity. And please do let me know in the comments of this video which classes you decide to try. I'd really love to hear about it. Thank you so much, Skillshare, for making this video possible.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do consider subscribing, giving it a like, and leaving a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. Has your experience been what I described? Have you, usually had a combined, learning experience of grammar and vocabulary? Has it been different? Do you agree? Disagree? Please do let me know. I love reading your comments. And with that, I leave you. And I'm sure this coffee is now significantly cooler than in the beginning.